Some experts estimate that 1 million Americans suffer from a neurodegenerative disorder called Parkinson's disease. What do you know about Parkinson's? Have you known anyone who has it? You might know the name Michael J. Fox. He's probably the most famous one who suffers from Parkinson's disease. So one of the symptoms of PD, as they often call it, is difficulty walking and maintaining balance. Those who suffer often have a very short gait, shuffling steps, and trouble staying upright. What's worse, Parkinson's also degrades the eyesight and makes it harder for the brain to harmonize data from multiple senses at once. Think about what your brain does when you're walking. It's processing information from your eyes about where to step, and from your legs and feet about the consistency of the ground beneath you, and even from your inner ear about your balance. Now, you probably knew that your inner ears affect your equilibrium and your balance, but your balance is influenced by your eyes as well. Now, whenever I've done yoga, which isn't a lot, but it's some, there's this obligatory tree pose. Maybe you know it, where you stand on, I'm not going to really try to do it. You stand on one foot, put your other foot next to your the leg or the knee on your standing leg. And I can do it okay. You saw me hold it for like a second and a half there. I'm not amazing at it, but the instructor says that if possible, when doing this pose, I should close my eyes. Now, I have managed to stand there in the tree pose for 15 or 20 seconds or more, back when I did it more often. But by the point I close my eyes, I've been keeping my balance pretty well, but as soon as my eyes are closed, I topple over. So in 2016, a team of researchers started wondering if Parkinson's patients might be just the opposite of that. They hypothesized that the brain's difficulty in harmonizing the multisensory data might actually be causing them to lose their balance when their eyes are open. So they did a study to see whether a blindfolded session on a treadmill, or a series of sessions, of course, might help improve their subject's sense of balance. Now, as human beings, we rely pretty heavily on our sense of sight, don't we? But the researchers found that their subjects actually improved their ability to walk when they stopped relying on visual data, which was getting worse and also harder to process. When that was taken away from them, they had to learn to trust their stronger senses, and those other senses got stronger still. What else do we rely too heavily on? What do we use as a crutch, even though that crutch may be cracking and breaking underneath us? Some people call religion a crutch. Karl Marx famously ridiculed religion as an opium of the masses. And this is a pretty common insult from a certain type of person, usually academics and intellectuals. Religion, faith, spirituality, mysticism, they're all depicted as foolish superstitions designed to subvert critical thinking. It can be seen as the soul or the heart trying to defeat the mind. And for the most part, we've bought it. And you might be starting to recognize some of these ideas from last week if you were here. We've become convinced that our reality must be logical and rational. That quote, understanding is all about discerning the good from the bad, the light from the dark, the true from the false. That everything in life must be either or. Now, Jesus might point out that intellectual understanding for us is like eyesight for a Parkinson's patient. We've been taught to rely so heavily on it that we will continue to do so even after it fails us. And we keep on trying to sort out the either-ors of life, even as Jesus tries to show us the both-ands. Maybe the things that seem on the surface to contradict each other are really connected underneath. Maybe Jesus is both God and human. Maybe he wants us to be both mature and childlike. Maybe the wheat and the weeds don't represent different people, as Jesus' explanation of the parable seems to imply. Maybe each of us is made up of both wheat and weeds. Now, this changes everything, doesn't it? Look at what happened to the church when we made up our minds that half the people around us or more are basically agricultural clutter put there by the devil. And God would just as soon get rid of them, except for some technical reason. It can't be done yet. So we just have to tolerate them and try not to let them hog our air or the nutrients in our soil until the harvest at the end of time. Does this thinking sound familiar? Maybe a little bit? But it doesn't sound like Jesus, does it? It doesn't jive with his larger message at all about God's love and inclusion. Are there stalks of nourishing wheat planted by God? Yes. Are there also invasive species threatening the health of that wheat? Yes. But I don't have to look outside myself to find both of those things. When you look in your spirit, I imagine you can see them both as well. Even when the church gets this right, we tend to stumble over another interpretive obstacle. We recognize that there is both bad and good inside each of us, but that something incredible happens the moment we say the magic words and invite Jesus into our heart. The weeds get pulled out right away, supposedly. All of a sudden, we become these pure and perfect beings, no longer threatened by the weeds of sin. But Jesus' parable rules that out, doesn't it? And maybe that's what he's really getting at with this story, that we have two contrasting things inside of us, both nutrient givers and nutrient takers. And this is the human experience. To carry both light and shadow, both freedom and slavery, both yin and yang, if you will. Now, if we've had trouble getting our heads around that idea for the last, several centuries, maybe it's because we've only been doing it with our heads. Our minds don't really have that kind of flexibility, that both and flexibility, to hold those tensions together. Which is fine as long as we remember that we are so much more than just our minds. I am a mind, but I am also a body. Those of you in the confirmation class this morning are recognizing this. I am also a body. I am also a heart. And when we trust our bodies, when we trust our hearts, to help guide us, we can begin to grasp what it means to be human, but these contrasting things happening inside of us. We may lean into the light. Sure, I think that is what we try to do. But we should not resent the shadow. One day, perhaps far into the future, or perhaps even a little sooner, we will all graduate from the human experience. We will not be expected to hold those things in tension with one another. The weeds will be pulled and thrown into the furnace, and the wheat will be harvested in all its purity. But not today. Today, we do best when we seek the wisdom in these contrasts. When we learn to pay a little less attention to our minds and a little more to our bodies and our hearts and our spirits, so that we can love the Lord our God as Jesus commands, with our heart, mind, soul, and strength. Now, as I was pondering this, I was drawn to a prayer in a favorite book of mine called Celtic Benedictions by Philip Newell. Highly recommended. I've been using this more than the BCP for my personal devotions lately. So one prayer came to mind as I was studying this and pondering this, and I'd like to end the sermon with that prayer. That you formed my body in the darkness of the womb and fashioned every creature from the soil of the earth. Thanks be to you, O God. That you knitted into my senses a thirst for water and a hunger for food, and wove into every living being desires for life and pleasure in their satisfaction. Thanks be to you. Let me be alert to the yearnings that you have placed within me, and let me know what will truly satisfy the desires of my heart. Let me be attentive to the yearnings that you have planted in every human being, and let me be sure of what will fulfill them. Let me be guided by your wisdom, O Christ. Let me be guided by your wisdom. Amen.